This is Natalie Rolls, and you are listening to the Bill Podcast. Presented by Patrick Stratford. Brought to you in association with GeorgeFairbrother.com, shop.saturdaymorningpress.co.uk, vanguardcomics.co.uk, gibconsultancy.co.uk, mcr-seo.com, and donspillane.com. The Manchester SEO Podcast, a podcast for business owners revealing how they got started, how they grew their business, the challenges now and in the future. Featuring special guests, including the Bill legend, Sally Rogers.
I'm an irritating optimist most of the time. And I think if you lose a big client or if something seismic shifts in your business, it can be the absolute making of you.
Right.
Because you've got to reframe, you've got to stand back, you've got to look at the margarine. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes everyone's wardrobe needs a clear out from time to time, and we get comfortable and relaxed into it, and it stops you being hungry.
Sure.
And I think that hunger is fantastic.
Tune in to Manchester SEO Podcast on all good podcasting platforms. Find out more at mcr-seo.com.
Hello and welcome to the Bill Podcast. It's Oliver here. I hope you are all well. My huge thanks to Natalie for recording that cracking sponsor promo. The Manchester SEO Podcast is a cracking podcast. It's presented by James Crissell, our sponsor and executive producer. My huge thanks to James for his support of the Bill Podcast this year. And indeed, my huge thanks and gratitude to all 6 of our sponsors, who between them do so much to make the Bill Podcast possible. So thank you, George Fairbrother, Michael Seeley, Mark Bennett, Stuart Gibbon, James Crissell, and Don Spillane. Massive thanks too to my co-presenters, Rob Cook, Edward Kellett, and Patrick Stratford, who between them have delivered some fantastic interviews on the channel this year, and there's loads more coming up in 2026. Massive thanks to our Patreon supporters, and if you're listening to this and you've ever been curious about the Patreon channel, please do consider supporting us. For $2.99 as a rookie patron, you will unlock over 100 hours of content immediately. There's reactions, there's reunions, there's sample episodes of The Evidence Room 1999. A ridiculous amount of gold dust is in each of those editions of The Evidence Room. So please do consider supporting the podcast for $2.99 and get involved. There's a fantastic community on there, commenting on cast and crew commentaries, advanced releases of podcasts, pilgrimages, the Bill Obbo cast. There's so much to enjoy, so please do consider supporting the Bill Podcast Patreon channel. And now coming up, a very special interview thanks to Patrick Stratford, who recorded a brilliant 2-part podcast with the mighty Dominic Power, who for 3 years at the end of the Bill played PC Leon Taylor in some extraordinary storylines. And you are in for a treat in this podcast, as he actually gives a hint on what we all missed out on in the Bill in 2011. If only, right? Sit back, relax, and enjoy part 1 of Patrick's 2-part interview with the brilliant Dominic Power. Over to you, Patrick.
Hiya, Patrick. Dominic, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Welcome to the Bill Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You recently announced the online Screen Academy. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that.
I've been really lucky in my acting career to go from ongoing shows, like, you know, spending 3 years or whatever on the bill, and then on to pretty much straight on to Emmerdale for 3 years, and then being in a lovely drama, Unforgotten, playing Tom Courtney's son. And then it was during that period that one of the producers said to me on that job, which took, you know, it was a couple of years after Emmerdale, said to me, at the Rat Pipe this was, said, "We nearly didn't cast you." And I said, oh, how come? And she said, "Because you've done soap." And there's a big issue with actors that have done soap. There's a bit of a snobbery thing. There's lots of exceptions to that. Your Sue Johnston, your Sarah Lancashire, you know. I mean, the list is pretty much endless. And I think it's becoming less and less, more so now, like the fact that the snobbery of when I was younger of TV and film, you know, movie stars would never do TV. And now, you know, it's their bread and butter. So things are sort of changing, and I'm hoping that's sort of changing. I mean, but it was strange because during that Unforgotten, I was the one that got the sort of the press, because obviously I was, you know, I've been in front of 5 million viewers every night for the last, you know, however many years. And it's interesting because then because that was season 1 of Unforgotten, the following seasons all had an ex-soap star in it. So so anyway, I digress, but it was that thing that as an actor that made me kind of go, oh wow, okay. I started to get quite frustrated, and you know, as it does for every actor, you go for a period where the phone stops ringing for a little while, and I'm not one to sit still. I decided, and I've always been interested in filmmaking and cameras and stuff, but I just noticed around that time someone at the bill had a camera, a DSLR that shot, you know, 24 frames a second, and it looked amazing, and I'm like, man, a DSLR can do that. And so it'd always been playing on my mind. And it was at that period where I was just, you know, twiddling my thumbs and just itching to be creative, that I suddenly thought, you know what, I'm going to learn how to make films, because I'm sure it's possible. And that's what I did. I worked with a college where I used to teach a performing arts course, and we shot a bunch of short films, very heavily influenced by European cinema, outside of maybe the film genres that they'd grown up watching. And so it was really informative. It was about mental health. It also looked at male suicide before male suicide became a big thing. We got them shown at the BFI, which was great. And then a few years later, or a year or so later, I sort of went back, and they said, "Do you want to come back and do another, you know, film with the students?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do a feature film." So for literally, I think £12, and that was on a bowl of fruit, we shot an 87-minute feature, which, you know, when the actors who weren't trained actors weren't acting in a scene, they were sort of holding a boom mic, and, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was very, and since then, it did the festival circuit around the world, won over 40 awards, over 30 wins, and now it's streaming on Amazon Prime. So, you know, for something that cost no money, essentially. And so with that, my knowledge, you know, with my 10,000 hours of screen time, then my knowledge of filmmaking, I decided to, okay, I could begin writing a memoir. I could make a course and teach people how to do this. And so the idea is to teach actors their way around a camera. Everyone has a camera in their hand. iPhones shoot 24 frames a second, 4K. It's all about lighting. And if I can teach actors very simple ways to shoot their own work, then they're A, getting experience, and B, potentially starting to build showroom material. Also getting, you know, more experienced for when the self-tapes come through. They're used to being in front of the camera, they're used to the lighting, they know what they're doing, the setup and stuff. Because the main problem is, and with any sort of business or any course, I think you've got to look at what the problem are. And the problem for me as an actor was, if I'm not doing it, then how can I get better? And I can't do it. Actors is the weirdest industry. It's the only profession that you can't do your profession unless the industry invites you to do it. I can't act unless the industry says so. Well, that's sort of changed now, because everyone's got a camera and everyone can shoot cinematic 4K. And you talk about miking it, you can buy a lav mic that plugs straight into your iPhone for 14 quid on Amazon. So it's all possible. So I'm building the course at the moment, working with actors, creating template show reels for actors to join the community, join the course. And you know, obviously, so when I'm teaching what my technique and what's got me through and got me the next job as an actor and served me as an actor in terms of technique and flow. I'm teaching that, but then immediately they get to put it into practice. They can then pick up the camera, or if they've got a DSLR, then great, and then start to build their showroom.
And what would you say that you enjoy most about teaching young actors?
Well, I've been teaching for 30 years, so it's always been a passion, and I guess it stems from when I was taught, because I was a late developer, I guess, later in life, like so many people at the moment. You go, oh right, okay, I'm definitely on the spectrum, and my special needs when I was at school weren't picked up as to why I was special, why they were special. It was just, I was told, that I just wasn't good. And so I left school with no qualifications whatsoever. I spent a couple of years on a building site, which was great life experience, I suppose, but I didn't particularly enjoy it as much as, I then suddenly got a thirst for knowledge, realized I couldn't keep up with, points of reference of my friends who were educated and stuff. And then decided just to go back to college. And it was going back to college to resit my GCSEs, tail between my legs, that I started to do drama. And then suddenly the guy who was doing drama the following year was starting a performing arts course. And he said, do you want to start? I was like, well, I got nothing else to do. So that's what I did. So I'd never done drama at school because it wasn't available. They didn't do it. So I had no real knowledge or desire to be an actor at that point. But I realized maybe along the way it was kind of already written. I was good at, the odd impression and being stupid and characters and all that stuff. And so, and I was very creative, I guess, which made up for not being sort of, academic. And yeah, and that's kind of, that's where it started. So I suppose my love for teaching was then developed by how, for the first time in my life, at 19 years old or whatever, I was suddenly treated with respect, and I was validated because I could do something, and I could do something pretty well. And I was treated like an adult for the first time by a grown-up, by someone 10 years my senior and 10, 15 years my senior. And so, and that really stuck with me. And I thought, man, that was so powerful for me, that, the buzz I then get from instilling a passion into young people, is as rewarding, is if not more rewarding than acting itself. When we did the feature film Medicine, which is on Amazon, some of these kids were between sort of 17 and 18. And when you're at that age, you don't necessarily know what you want to do. But they were just on the acting course, like I was on the acting course years before them. And it's the exact same course, by the way. One of them went on to RADA, but almost more interestingly, 4 of them went on to film school. Suddenly realized, okay, acting isn't the route, but I really love this. And so if I did exactly what my first mentor did for me, and suddenly went, right, well, I'm going to treat you like an adult here, and I'm going to give you responsibility, and I'm going to give you faith, and I'm going to listen to your ideas, because, I practice Buddhism, and there's a mentor-disciple thing in Buddhism. It's a two-way thing. So even the mentor should always listen to the disciple as well, because we're both learning, And that's very, very important in teaching, I think.
As an actor and a filmmaker, who would you say, or what would you say, were your biggest creative inspirations?
As an actor, my favourite actors are kind of, the list is sort of endless, but I guess my first actor that inspired me, before I knew I wanted to be an actor, but I remember this, was James Dean. When I was younger, on Saturday afternoons on BBC Two, they used to do like a Saturday matinee, and they'd play an old film or whatever. And I was just, I wasn't doing anything, and my sister was watching this film, and I think it was East of Eden. I just remember sort of sat there, sort of staring into space. It's like when people say, what are you doing? I'm watching TV. And they go, what are you watching? You go, nothing. I was sort of doing that. But I remember suddenly just going, it piqued my interest, because I was thinking, who is this guy? I've seen him, because there was a bit of a resurgence of Marilyn Monroe and James Dean around the late 80s, that everyone buying 501s and getting into that 50s Americana thing. And I remember just noticing the fact that what he was doing looked so different to what everyone else was doing in the scene. It looked like he was in Technicolor and everyone else was in black and white, even though the film was in, I was just thinking, well, this is strange. And so later on, when I became an actor, that that dawned on me what that was. And yeah, and I suppose other actors, moving on, Jack Nicholson was always, one of my favourite films is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and just watching him be, because he just nails behaviour. He just has behaviour down. And I think for an actor, it's about, you've got the lines in and they're just there, like a stick of rock. Your character's there. You then behave, And I think that's the key thing for actors. How do I stop this from just being lines on a page, And there's various techniques you can use, but yeah, anything Jack Nicholson is in, you can, he's genius. Filmmaking, I guess one of my favourite modern filmmakers is Paul Thomas Anderson, Yorgos Lanthimos, although I prefer, it sounds so cliche, but I prefer his kind of early stuff. I like Dogtooth and things like that. I'm not so keen on the later stuff. And I think that's interesting for filmmakers, which is why I quite like, making films from scratch. Yorgos Lanthimos sort of looks back on Dogtooth, his early films, and sort of goes and thinks, oh no, there's too many technical mistakes and all that. I remember watching, hearing weirdly, the saxophonist from UB40 saying when he listens back to Food for Thought, which was one of their big early first singles, which is led by this brilliant saxophone, right? He goes, yeah, I'm playing the wrong saxophone in that. I didn't know better because I was younger. And it's like, yeah, but it's brilliant. It works probably better because you didn't know, and as UB40 got, you listen to their later stuff that just doesn't appeal to me because it's all polished and overproduced. And, and sometimes I think that rough as a badger's ass looking art is more authentic, it's more me, I think,
Well, what was it like for you, that journey of breaking into television? What would you say you learned as both an actor and to do with your work as a filmmaker later on?
It was a long learning curve. I mean, I went to Anna Scher's first of all. I had my daughter quite young, and so I was in a domestic situation, so I wasn't in a position to go to drama school. So I had a friend who went to Anna Scher's as a youth, who started up again as a young adult. So I joined him as a young adult. Eventually got myself onto the books. Anna obviously was incredible. Going to Anna's, just having that opportunity, you just don't get nowadays. And I mean, you'd spend less time working on acting. You'd spend more time talking about Martin Luther King and why it's important to be nice to people. I mean, that's, we'd do a little bit of improvisation, but the rest was kind of offering an alternative to what we might be around as young people day to day. I mean, I remember seeing Joe Swash on Celebrity Get Me Out of It years and years ago, and I was thinking how nice he was and how he didn't contribute into gossip and how he didn't talk behind people's backs or anything like that. And I was thinking that's so Anna Scher's. That's so typical of an Anna Scher student, and that's kind of the magic of what she did. It wasn't just about the acting. Her phrase was "talent thrives through training together." That was one of her alliterations, and it was all about that no one's a VIP, everyone's a VSP, a very special person.
Wow.
You should drop that into you weekly.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of good actors, including actors who are on the bill, seem to have came from the Anna Scher school. So it seems to have bred a lot of great talent over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it was just that one, that rare avenue for working class actors to find a way, and lo and behold, there was a market for it. I mean, of course there was, because TV was starting to represent the work that the masses, rather than just in the play for today's or the gritty dramas that were on after 9 o'clock. It was suddenly, it was prime time. It was EastEnders, it was The Bill, and this was the time when there were 3 channels on TV, so you knew what day it was by, if it was on or not. Crikey, I don't know. I can't remember how many times I've done The Bill before I landed a regular.
You appeared a total of 5 guest appearances before joining us as Leon Taylor.
I love the fact that you know that. So my first bill was I was an illegal parker parking on a double yellow line, and I think that was one of my first TV jobs, and I was petrified. I was petrified just being around all these people that I'd seen on the telly. It's my first experience of all of that. It was just really, yeah, it's quite overwhelming. And you know, and I'm thinking De Niro, Pacino, you know, I'm playing an illegal park ride, you know, just say the line and being, you know, all of these things were bombarding me as to how to play this and that magic of what you look like in real life and how that transposes that transition between what you're seeing in front of you to how it then comes out on the camera. And you know, I had so many ideas of what that was, and they were all mostly wrong. Yeah, and it took me years to kind of to get to a point where, you know, and again, this feeds into my course. Watch yourself on camera. Watch what you're doing. Watch, you know, I did a short film once, and I had quite an emotional scene. And I was prepping for this emotional scene and just sort of, you know, thinking and put myself there. And then they said action, and I sort of let out this emotion. And it was way, way, way too much. They were secretly recording me prep. And in the final cut, they just used me prepping, which was enough.
Wow.
Yeah. Didn't need all that, you know, stuff. So, and again, you know, all of these experiences I'll be sort of chucking into my course and stuff. And I think that's the important thing. You've got to have these lived experiences. And I'm still an actor and I'm still doing it and I'm still out there. And
Well, I think you definitely did leave a strong impression to the bill, because you actually made another guest appearance later that year. It was in an episode called Potential for Conflict, which was set at Hendon. It was
yeah.
Luke Ashton's first appearance on the show, and it was all about the conflict that you and Scott Neal had together. I wondered if you had any memories of doing that one.
Yeah, I do. I mean, that was, you know, again, that was a joy because we were filming at Hendon. One of the actors that I was working with, one of the other guest actors, he had his hat on, just a tilt, and he was kind of smoking a cigarette. And then one of the sergeants came round and screamed at him, "Get out, probably put that cigarette." And he's like it's like an actor. It's, you know, it's like, doesn't matter. You're at Hendon, you know. And it was great because I knew Scott as well, you know, and it was, you know, and I remember seeing Scott in the bill and going, "Man, you're so lucky you've got this gig, you know, how lucky, you know, to be able to do this every day." And yeah, years later, I managed to nab the deal as well. I think the one that stuck in their minds was when I played Piers Houston, which
Yes.
was the one before. And I kind of, because I just tried a few things. I can't remember whether they actually showed him in the cut, but if I was on the phone and, you know, that behavior, I just felt some of the dialogue was, you know, I just wanted to break it up. So I said, "Can I be on the phone in the middle of a conversation and do this dialogue?" And they were like, "Yeah, fine." So I was like, you know, we'd like to think outside the box. And yeah. You know, and so, and I think that confidence in being able to play like that as a guest actor sort of went down well.
Well, it was a great scene where you have a standoff with Chris Simmons, and you end up punching him in the face before running off.
Yeah, I remember that episode actually because we were filming somewhere on the Thames. The offices were sort of looked out onto the Thames, and his dad has a boat, and he went, "Oh, there's my dad on the Thames." It's like, what? So weird. And he was like, "Dad, I'll see you for lunch."
And I guess that guest appearance was instrumental in getting cast as Leon the following year.
You know, that was an interesting casting because obviously they cast 3 people at the same time. It was strange because the part that I was going up for, I was seeing, and they didn't really know what they want. There were sort of lots of different types, but all around the same age. Yeah, so it was, you know, and there was a bunch of people up for it, and I thought, well, I might get it, I might not, you know, and it's fine. It's just another, you know, it's a nice look in the door. And I got recalled, and I was like, "Oh, great, okay." And then I got another recall, and I got to go, "We just want to see what you look like in the uniform." And I remember sticking the uniform on and having to walk down the corridor, which I'd walked down a few times before because I'd done a bunch of reps already. So I knew the place. So I sort of had a bit of confidence in the environment. And as an actor, it's about whatever environment you're in. It's about taking possession of the environment. If you look like you belong there, then that, you know, that's your starting point. Take possession of your environment, but don't be a dick. You know, you don't have to be sort of too cocky with it. You just have to be part of it. And I remember walking down the corridor in this police uniform going, "I've got this. This feels too like." It changed the way I walked. It changed the way, you know, just everything just shifted. I walked down that corridor like a copper. And to me, I was like, yeah, this. I've got this. I might not have done, but to me, it just felt so right and so natural that I was like, yeah, this feels good.
And how similar would you say was the Dominic Power of 2008 to Leon Taylor, and what appealed most to you about playing him?
I'm not. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a fun character to play, and because he was a bit of a maverick. I mean, we had to ask permission whether or not I could leave my stubble, because I don't think there'd ever been a policeman on TV with stubble before. And because the Met said, well, as long as it's sort of tidy. But then in the following years, you'd start to see policemen on the streets with stubble, You start to see, women police with their hair down and stuff, Lots of things sort of changed. And the character, I just suddenly realized that, I mean, when I got the part, I studied, because it was back, people would sort of go, back in the old days, people had respect for police and all that, and I guess they did in a lot of ways. You wouldn't backchat a copper or whatever, and they could be quite intimidating sometimes, and they definitely had a status that they don't necessarily wield so much now, and so it was fascinating for me as an actor to find out what these people were like when they weren't in front of members of the public, talking like, well, if you could step out the car, sir, once they were not doing that, what were they doing when they were just in the cars? And at the time, there was a big spate of these documentaries, police documentaries. And I remember watching one, and it finished. I was like, damn. So I flipped through the channels. I found 3 more police documentaries on at the same time on other channels. So I was like, right, well, that's great. This was also 8 years after, or a few years after, 8 years after Big Brother. Right now, my theory is Big Brother had a big impact on how we act, how actors now act, because audience members would watch what they used to do. Big Brother used to do streaming 24/7, and people just used to sit there watching people doing nothing. But what the audience then got to perceive was the discern, the detail in whether people are lying and stuff, and people were just being themselves. And so the more that reality TV kicked in, well, 8 years later, performances as an actor has to step up to that, because otherwise we're going to look massive, So it was about being as natural as possible. So through watching police documentaries, through being around the police, and just, my acting training through improvisation, was just trying to be as natural as possible, and just trying to, just be, don't over egg it. And I always had a problem that whenever I had any soap script, for some reason my brain would look at the script and just hear the worst actor saying these lines, and lots of actors complain the lines, but over the years I've developed, and I've realized it's, you can invert them, you can create, make it a challenge for yourself. Don't change a single word and try and make it work. And that's kind of what I did, what I started doing, and it stood me in good stead throughout then Emmerdale and Hollyoaks and stuff, and the other jobs that I've done. It's, go Christopher Walken on it, take out the punctuation.
Absolutely. I mean, what's been great about rewatching your episodes again is just see, and you mentioned about behavior early on, just how subtle you are as Leon, and then those moments, and sometimes, and we can get into them later on, but those really dramatic, really dark moments that happen to him, and you're so subtle and quiet in those moments. Do you think that's just something that comes? I mean, you talked about observing James Dean and all these great actors, but do you think there's another element? Where do you think that comes from within you, would you say?
I think I was probably, playing, I was definitely not wanting to be too big. So as a younger actor, it was a real sort of fear of being overacting, I remember a mate of mine said, I saw you on so-and-so the other day. I was like, oh yeah, any good? He was like, no. He said, you did this massive reaction. He said it was just so big. I was like, how big? He goes, put it this way. He said, that reaction and the Great Wall of China, you could see from that. And Anna Scher, as kind as it was, there was a kind of, you'd get ribbed if you were shit, there was a pressure on you just to be as solid and not give anything away. We used to do the briefing room scenes at the Bill, and they'd shoot it. If there's 12 of us in there, they'd shoot it 12 times to cover every single person in the room, like reacting. So there'd just be Alex Walkinshaw at the front doing this talk, bless him, and they'd have to do it, a bunch more times so that they could get coverage of us listening. And when we listened, I knew as an actor just to do nothing, just to listen, just really listen, as actors are supposed to do. Because the moment I go, that's the bit they'll use. So I would just do nothing. And all they could use is me being still actually listening, because sometimes there's a fear, certainly, in ongoing dramas and stuff, that there's not enough information for the audience. And I think that's, disrespectful to the audience, because a Bill or a Hollyoaks or an Emmerdale audience could quite happily watch something like Line of Duty. But the Line of Duty audience might feel a little bit sort of, dumbed down by some of the kind of soap stuff. So I think it's just because of expedience and it's about sort of making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But as an actor, you can go in there and you can sort of take control of that a little bit, which is what I guess I tried to do, and tried to kind of, sometimes they'll go, when a director says, can you be bigger? They don't, that's a terrible director, by the way, that would say something like that, I want it to be, as an actor, you have to invert that by them saying, I want you to feel this more. You don't have to do a bigger reaction. You just got to believe it more. If you're in the zone, you're in the zone. And that was the point. And I remember when I did the scene in the toilet with Sergeant Stone the day after seeing the kid that had died and in his bed and doing that crying in the toilets. And I remember the first AD sort of after the take going, bloody hell, as if to say, calm down, it's only the bill. But it's like, well, I don't know how to do it any other way, because I trained in improvisation. And some people can make a very good living and do make a very good living out of sort of doing it a little bit by numbers and whatever. And that's fine. But I guess mine has, I have to come from underneath it and sort of be it. It's not a kind of, it's, I don't know anyone, if I tried it any other way, I'd be terrible. So I have to kind of go this same route as an actor, because also the bill had a bit of a reputation for actors. It was kind of, again, there was a snobbery amongst actors. So I'm like, well, if I'm in the bill and I know there's a potential snobbery amongst actors that would never do TV, I'll only do film and all that stuff. There's pressure on you to raise the bar for where you are. You don't, just because you're in a show that, has production values that aren't as great as this, it doesn't mean to say that your acting has to be any less good. Or you don't have to be as less invested as an actor. If anything, be more invested in an actor. Now, I remember when I was doing Emmerdale, it was like, man, when I started this and it's multicam, and it's shot like a stage. There's a wall, there's a fourth wall where the cameras are. I'm like, man, the set, sometimes the sets shake and you're getting an early draft script. I mean, everything's against you before you've even got in front of the cameras. Everything's against you. So if you can make that kind of all right or good or really watchable, then you're a good actor.
I'd say you give a phenomenal performance in those scenes, and your heart breaks for him, just because you see just the sort of the grief that he goes through, and when you and Sarah Manners are getting drunk together and you're both going through this it's almost like cathartic in a way. Just phenomenal performances, and you get top billing in one of those episodes, and that it must have been a thrill to have something like that as an actor.
It was great. And, working with Sarah was great. I mean, all the cast were great, all the stuff where they're ribbing me afterwards, when they see it on the CCTV of us kissing. That's so funny, and I love that. And I really miss it. There was such brilliant camaraderie. We had such fun on the bill. That was one of the bittersweet things. The producer, Jonathan Young, when the show had come to an end and we'd got the news, it was being axed, he said to me, it's a real shame because you were going to be really busy next year.
This is Natalie Rolls, and you have been listening to the Bill Podcast. Brought to you in association with GeorgeFairbrother.com, shop.saturdaymorningpress.co.uk, vanguardcomics.co.uk, gibconsultancy.co.uk, mcr-seo.com, and donspillane.com. The Bill podcast is produced by Oliver Crocker and co-produced by Ben Adams, Glenn Cooney, Bryony Kelly, Maz Mirabilis, Alex Mockler, and Simon Wolfe. Our executive producers are Isabel Allen, Mark Bennett, Christopher Booth, Rob Cook, James Crissell, Rebecca Deeprose, Alana Dewar, Andrew Dyack, Dan Evans, George Fairbrother, Stuart Gibbon, Vicky Greatbanks, Luke Hegarty, Robert Hoger, Edward Kellett, James Ledane, Thomas Johnston, Dave Meakin, Gary Moncur, Danny Morris, Steph Morris, Laura Pinney-Fay, Isaac Powell, Alistair Wrigley, Michael Seeley, Don Spillane, Angel Stannard, Paul Statter, Patrick Stratford, and Sarah Went. Huge thanks to all you lovely producers who make the Bill podcast possible. For over 200 hours of bonus content, visit patreon.com/The Bill Podcast.